Hi there, I'm Alan Stoddart. I'm the editor of Signify Premium Insights Medical Imaging Service, and I'm joined with Amy Thompson, the research manager for healthcare IT. And Amy's just published the second half update of the Imaging IT report, as well as the market opportunities for enterprise imaging. So, Amy,
Yeah.
hi there.
Hi.
Why don't you start by telling us about the Imaging IT report?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, we've just published our second half updates. That's looking at the year so far for 2023. And what's really interesting is, at the beginning of the year and even looking into 2023, there was a lot of kind of concern around how the market would perform based on kind of economic headwinds. Inflation was at like all-time highs, and there was this kind of underlying worry of when this kind of market crash will happen, just in general, and global recession. But actually, speaking to vendors so far, there's a lot of optimism in the market, and actually pipelines and opportunities are still very much coming through. That replacement cycle in the US that we've written quite a lot about is really coming to fruition and kind of providing that growth outlook into 2024. What's really interesting, though, from our research is how the dynamic in the market is going to change. So in this year and last, a lot of the opportunities have been propped up in imaging IT by the mature markets. So EU funding in Western Europe and North America, as I mentioned. Whereas actually, if you start looking out to the midterm forecasts of 25 and 26, it's really starting to turn into the more emerging markets. So looking more at ASEAN in Asia Pacific, China, for example, and kind of bouncing back from the pandemic, the Middle East, Brazil, which really kind of begin to shift on what the providers need, because they're very different economies, different infrastructure, different IT requirements. So it creates, as vendors and you start to look out into the market, begins to pose some interesting questions around actually how do you then begin to adapt while still meeting the needs of your current mature market, which are leading more towards kind of enterprise imaging or AI and more advanced systems, but actually whilst looking at these new markets that you maybe might not have done in previous years.
Interesting. And you just mentioned it there on the enterprise imaging side. So,
Mm-hmm.
and you've also recently published that report. So perhaps you could tell us what's changed from last year on the enterprise imaging side?
Yeah, so this report was really interesting. And, when we've talked around enterprise imaging before, and even in the industry, enterprise imaging is not a new concept. It was coined as a strategy, almost a decade ago. But really, when you've looked at the investment in, it's been much more enterprise radiology. But where we're at the market now is following the pandemic and that redirection of budgets, obviously in 2020. Now we're through that, providers are looking at longer term strategies again, and really looking at this multi-specialty strategy. So you're beginning to see a more kind of injection of pathology into the conversation. We're seeing it at conferences, the Society of Imaging Informatics in Medicine, back in June, had a lot of pathology references, and how do you bring that into that enterprise strategy. The same with point of care ultrasound imaging, and even more so as you start looking beyond kind of cardiology and radiology, which have been fairly common in the market so far. So it's been a really interesting kind of evolution where a lot of the conversations that we're having in the market of these strategies and these plans, and in the short term we're looking, actually is now turning more so to reality. Now, obviously, enterprise imaging is quite an investment for providers, so it's not going to be a big bang tomorrow or in 2024. All deals are going to be, these big, grand 8-9 figure deals, all encompassing. But you're beginning to see a more realistic kind of time frame with providers selecting their vendors based on their roadmap to delivering this. So it is becoming more of a reality, and very important kind of from a vendor perspective on making sure they achieve this over the course of the 3 to 5 years.
Well, fascinating. It's very interesting. And with, it's the start of November now, RSNA is a couple of weeks away. So what are you expecting to see in Chicago?
I think Chicago will be really fun this year. I mean, it's fun every year. But I think there's a lot of positive sentiment from vendors attending that, since 2021, when we returned post-pandemic, the show's been getting kind of slowly back to normal with more and more attendance from international companies and attendees. And I think we're now going to see a bit more of kind of that resurgence from the imaging informatics guys on that AI story. It was a bit quiet last year due to, as I mentioned, the reprioritization of what providers were spending on their IT budgets. There's quite a big focus last year on operational workflow. That will remain, but I think the forefront will return to AI, both in terms of platforms and orchestration, but also enterprise imaging will continue. Undoubtedly, as I mentioned, it's probably the market's now getting to a point from a vendor side of not just those roadmaps that I've discussed. That will be crucial for vendors to have, but also we're kind of reaching the stage in the market where vendors also need to start demonstrating not the full platform, that is a long-term strategy, but having those roadblocks evident at the show, and as where possible, obviously having those customer use sites or applications where they can prove and show it to customers.
Oh, thanks for that, Amy. That was really interesting. And if people want to learn more or talk to you about some of these topics in person, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, so I will be attending the RSNA in Chicago alongside 9 other analysts. So Signify will be bringing its biggest team yet, which is very exciting. So you can directly kind of email to schedule some time with us. Happy to kind of pop by vendors' booths or even meet for a coffee if you can stand the Starbucks line, that is. So yeah, just kind of through the emails, it's fine.
Brilliant, thank you.
No problem.